what do you think about the sentiment around the stock these days? I feel that it's the worst that it's ever been, even worse than 2019.
It is the worst that it's ever been. And the company isn't doing the worst it's ever done, but people are really losing their minds. It's a combination of really the stock sort of correcting downwards after just mooning after S&P inclusion, combined with, Elon buying Twitter and just tweeting about immigration or whatever else. Like a lot of these early supporters, they were Democrats. Many of them really feel personally offended. So not only are they offended by what he's saying, they feel that they're losing money because of him and what he did, and they've lost confidence in him, and everything's just horrible, right? So that's kind of just where sentiment is.
So Wes tells me that the search results for Tesla are very positive, but the stock sentiment feels very negative. How do you reconcile between those two?
I mean, I think the business is really doing phenomenally if you just sort of look at things objectively. If you're sort of looking at the stock price, then oh my God, yeah, the stock price used to be higher. But that's what stupid people do, right? Smart people look at the business and not the stock price. So, I mean, it's kind of unavoidable when you have something like that. Sentiment's going to be negative. I think with everything else going on, they see other stocks doing well. They say, okay, clearly this is management's fault. But then you just look at the sales numbers. I mean, we got the full year numbers for 2023. Best selling electric vehicle in the world, Model Y. Second best selling electric vehicle in the world, Model 3. These are their first two mass market products. Now they're bringing out a truck. They're bringing up a compact crossover. They hit two home runs. And honestly, I think the Cybertruck's another one. Wes just talked about the new Model 3. There's a new Model Y coming. They've got a really good lineup of products this year. Like, really good. Like, even I was surprised trying the new Model 3 and the Cybertruck. Like, wow, these are really solid. These are really quiet. This is the next generation of Tesla products. And things kind of stayed still a little bit during the pandemic because of the chip shortage and because of the supply chain crisis. We saw really slow ramps of new vehicles, like, for example, the new Model S and X. And we saw them just making less changes just because of the complexity and the fact that they had to, recertify suppliers and rewrite software just to keep selling the existing cars, right? But now we're out of that and we're moving back into them launching new products. And I think people are going to be really excited as these get out there. They're just starting to get out there now. I think people are really going to love it. So, I mean, I think sentiment will improve when the stock keep starts going up. And it'll probably move pretty fast when it does, I think. There's also FSD 12. I think that's probably the biggest sort of new product introduction of all. And yeah, I think overall things are going pretty good. I'm not worried about the company going bankrupt, obviously. They've got a pretty huge cash position at 29 billion. They're going to add to that cash position this year. I see them eventually starting to return capital to shareholders maybe in the next few years potentially. Um, Overall, I think things are going pretty good. Could things be better? Sure. Could people be more informed about EVs? Know that you can get a Tesla for this price? Sure. There's a lot of things that could be done better. But overall, reality doesn't quite match the negative sentiment in my view.
Machine, what do you think about the disconnect between reality and the sentiment?
I'm not exactly sure what Wes was looking at. So I sort of challenge the notion necessarily that the data supports uh, positive sentiment on searching for Tesla. I'm not saying it's negative either, but I was just looking at Google Trends and search for Tesla Model Y and Tesla Model 3 has pretty flatlined over the last year. You could even argue, if I'm looking at the signal here, if I was trying to smooth it, that there's a slight decrease in search in the last year. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's not going up. You would think it would go up. You would ideally hope it to scale with production. So that's okay. And we know that demand has suffered
Right.
these cars. Like that's it, that there's lots of empirical data on that. And as much as people want to, we've all excused reasons
What
like
empirical data is there?
uh, it's called massive price cuts, Omar. Massive price cuts over and above any adjustment that would be due to interest rates, and over and above any adjustments due to volume increases, because the volume actually hasn't increased that much over the past year. Um, and we've known this because even in these spaces we discussed a year ago how we thought these 5-10% price cuts would lead to a much larger total addressable market, and it hasn't played out. And I don't even blame necessarily Tesla for that. I've said this many times about how you see similar patterns with all electric vehicle makers and their models. So there's something about electric vehicle demand in general there. But I would
I
say,
mean, sales of electric vehicles are going up every year. I would attribute the price reductions less to a change in demand and consumer sentiment and more to just a change in the market, right? We're talking about a period where literally nobody could produce cars and returning to a more normal environment.
so, but anyways, I'm not saying it's positive or negative. I'm just saying I don't think, I think Tesla, the company, is executing well, and I think long term, if you're just a fan of the company, there's no problems. If you're worried, it's a highly successful company. The problem comes at when people, and ignore the share price, right? I mean, because people, yeah, the sentiment goes around. Oh, if share price is up, people are happy. If share price is down, people are sad. And I agree with Omar. That's silly. And what you should be doing is looking at the expectations of the company making money, because that's what's going to lead to changes in share price over the long term. And simply put, the company is making less money now than it was expected to even 12 months ago. And so in the short term, it's the sentiment is reasonably a bit low by the fact that the company's not going to make as much money as people expected in the next year. And people are sad. Meanwhile, you have all these other companies like Nvidia, Meta, they're all making record profits, massive growth in profits, and their share prices go up, which makes sense. And for Tesla, they're just not in that situation right now. And the question becomes, when will that change? And what valuation is reasonable for a company at that point that finally gets their earnings back on track?